Imagine working 50 hours a week just to watch your bank account hit zero every single month. That was Barbara's reality at 62. A widow, a grandmother, and a head housekeeper at a high-end executive hotel in Orlando, Florida. Every day, she scrubbed the marble floors of suites she could never afford to stay in, while her own landlord hiked her rent by $200 every single year. She was drowning in the Sunshine State, stuck in a cycle of working to survive that felt more like working to disappear. But today, Barbara isn't scrubbing floors for a paycheck. She is sitting on the sun-drenched porch of her own home, completely mortgage-free, watching the hibiscus bloom in her private garden. How did a woman on a housekeeper's wage escape the rent trap in just 18 months? It was not a lottery win, a secret inheritance, or a risky stock tip. It was a radical, almost clinical psychological shift she calls the $12 method. It's a way of tricking the brain into building wealth while everyone else is distracted by the monthly struggle. Most people believe saving for a home requires massive salaries and decades of sacrifice. But Barbara proved it is actually about one tiny daily micro-win that defies traditional logic. I am sharing Barbara's journey today because stories like hers are the ones the big financial institutions do not want you to hear. They want you to believe that the American dream is dead for anyone making an hourly wage, but we are here to prove them wrong together. If you believe that hard-working people deserve a real chance at home ownership and true financial freedom, please take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel right now. It helps us reach more people who feel stuck in the endless rent cycle. Also, I would love to know where you are watching from today. Drop your city and state in the comments below and let me know what kind of financial underdog stories you want to see next. Barbara's story didn't start with a plan. It started with a panic attack in the middle of an empty kitchen. In the post-inflation economy of Central Florida, the median rent had skyrocketed, fueled by an influx of high-income remote workers and corporate buyouts of modest family homes. For a widow earning $22 an hour as a lead housekeeper, the math simply stopped working. Barbara found herself trapped in what economists call the squeezed middle, earning too much for government assistance but far too little to ever actually get ahead. Every 2 weeks, her paycheck would land, and by the time the rent, utilities, car insurance, and basic health coverage were deducted, she was left with a phantom balance. It was not just the lack of money, it was the psychological erosion of her dignity. She was the invisible force that kept the Orlando tourism industry running, yet she could no longer afford a life in the very city she served. This is the brutal, unspoken reality for millions of Americans over 60. The paralyzing fear that a single medical bill or one more rent hike will result in homelessness. Barbara watched her younger coworkers taking out predatory payday loans just to buy groceries, normalizing a state of permanent debt that felt like a modern form of indentured servitude. She realized the system was designed to keep her eyes fixed on the next 30 days, making it impossible to ever see a future beyond the next shift. Barbara spent her days moving like a ghost through the halls of the hotel, an invisible witness to the habits of the top 1%. She noticed a striking pattern that most people miss. The wealthy executives staying in the suites did not track every single penny, but they also never let their money sit idle. They had systems that worked while they slept. Meanwhile, her coworkers were trapped in a constant state of reactive spending, paralyzed by the sheer size of their monthly bills. She began to see that the traditional banking system and the culture of consumption were two sides of the same coin, designed to keep people like her in a state of perpetual anxiety. If you are always worried about the $1,500 rent check due in 3 weeks, you lose sight of the $10 slipping through your fingers today. Barbara realized that the system feeds on this lack of focus. It wants you to feel small and powerless against the big numbers so that you ignore the power of the small ones. She saw the injustice of a world where those who work the hardest own the least, and for the first time, she felt a productive rage. She did not want a raise, she wanted a way out of the game entirely. The breaking point didn't happen with a bang. It happened with a quiet, metallic snap. It was a Tuesday in July, the kind of Orlando afternoon where the humidity feels like a wet wool blanket and the heat rising off the asphalt can make you dizzy. Barbara was finishing her shift, her back aching from changing 42 sets of high thread count sheets when she walked out to the employee parking lot. She turned the key in her 15-year-old sedan, and instead of the familiar rumble, there was only a hollow clicking sound. The alternator had finally given up. As she sat there in the sweltering cabin, the silence felt heavy, almost suffocating. Just that morning, she had received a certified letter from her landlord. The property management company was raising her rent by another $180 starting the next month, citing market adjustments. She did the math in her head while sweat beaded on her forehead. After the rent hike, the car repair, and her utility bills, she would have exactly $42 to last her until her next paycheck, 14 days away. $42 for gas, groceries, and any emergencies. She didn't cry. She was too exhausted for tears. She just sat there in the stillness of that hot car, looking at her calloused hands, and realized that if she didn't change the rules of her life immediately, she was going to die in a rented room with nothing to her name but a collection of cleaning rags. That night, Barbara sat at her small kitchen table with every scrap of paper she owned. She had her bank statements, her utility bills, and her pay stubs spread out like a puzzle that refused to fit together. She saw the death by 1,000 cuts clearly for the first time. It wasn't the big bills that were killing her. She always managed to pay those. It was the leakage. It was the $4 at the gas station for a soda because she was thirsty. It was the $6 sandwich from the vending machine when she forgot her lunch. It was the just-in-case spending that happened because she saw a balance in her checking account and felt a false sense of security. She realized that her brain was wired to spend whatever was visible. As long as she saw a few $100s in her account, her mind told her she was okay. But she wasn't okay. She was one flat tire away from the street. In that moment of total vulnerability, an idea began to form. It was a strategy born of pure desperation and a strange kind of logic. She decided to treat her life like a high-security operation. She went to the computer and opened a new savings account at an online-only bank, one that didn't have any physical branches in Florida and took 3 business days to transfer money back to her main account. This was the vault. Then she sat down and calculated her absolute survival costs: rent, electricity, water, basic car insurance, and a bare-bones grocery list of staples like rice, beans, and eggs. Everything else, every single penny of her paycheck that wasn't spoken for by a bill, would be immediately deported to the vault the second it hit her main account. She would then give herself a daily allowance that was so small it forced her to be mindful, but just large enough to survive. She landed on the number 12, $12. The $12 method was born. The rules were absolute. Rule 1, the vault is a one-way street. No money comes out unless it is for the house down payment. Rule 2, the daily $12 is loaded onto a separate, dedicated prepaid debit card every morning. Rule 3, if you don't spend the $12, it stays on the card and rolls over to the next day, creating a reward fund. If you spend only $8 on Monday, you have $16 on Tuesday. This turned her survival into a game of micro-wins. The first week was brutal. Her internal resistance was a physical weight. On Wednesday, a coworker asked if she wanted to chip in for a pizza. Usually, Barbara would say yes just to feel normal, to feel like she belonged. But $12 doesn't buy a pizza and gas for the week. She had to say no. She felt the sting of shame, the feeling of being the poor one. But then she remembered the vault. That evening, she checked her phone. She had spent only $6 that day on a gallon of gas and a loaf of bread. She had $6 left. For the first time in years, she felt a tiny spark of power. She wasn't just surviving, she was winning a game against her own impulses. She began to see $12 everywhere. A $12 lunch was no longer just a meal, it was a day of her life. A $36 blouse was 3 days of her freedom. The simplicity was shocking. By focusing only on that $12 limit, the overwhelming anxiety of her $1,500 rent vanished. She didn't have to worry about the month. She only had to worry about the next 24 hours. She started carrying a small blue notebook, the one mentioned in her story, to track her daily wins. She would write, "Saved $4 today," with more pride than she had ever felt earning a paycheck. She was building a wall, brick by $12 brick, between herself and the rent trap. The sacrifice was real. There were nights she ate plain toast for dinner just to keep her reward fund growing, but the psychological shift was even more powerful. She was no longer a victim of the economy. She was the architect of her own escape. She was tired of being invisible, and she realized that the only way to become visible in America was to own the ground she stood on. I know it sounds almost too simple to be true, but Barbara's journey is a testament to what happens when you stop playing by the rules of a system designed to keep you broke. This isn't just a story, it's a blueprint for anyone who has ever felt like they were running a race they couldn't win. Every detail of her struggle, from the car breakdown to the vault, is a reality for millions of Americans who are reclaiming their dignity one day at a time. If you've ever looked at your bank account and felt that same sinking feeling Barbara did, please hit that like button and subscribe right now. It tells us that these stories matter. We are building a community here for the underdogs who are ready to fight back. Before we get into the exact numbers of how her savings exploded, I want to hear from you. What is the biggest financial hurdle you're facing right now? Is it rent, debt, or just the cost of living? Share your struggle in the comments below. You'd be surprised how many people are in the exact same boat. Stay with me, because what happened after the first 6 months changed everything. By the start of the third month, the $12 method had moved from a desperate experiment to a mathematical weapon. The initial shock to Barbara's system had worn off, replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. In those first 90 days, she had managed to move exactly $2,840 into the vault. To anyone else, that might have seemed like a modest sum, but to Barbara, it was a fortune. It was the first time in her adult life that she had a four-figure balance that didn't belong to a landlord or a credit card company. She looked at that number on her phone screen every night before bed, and it felt more restorative than 8 hours of sleep. She began to realize that her poverty hadn't been a lack of character, it had been a lack of a boundary. The $12 daily limit was that boundary. It was her shield. The numbers started to tell a story that her paycheck never could. She discovered that by limiting herself to $12 a day, she was effectively firing the consumer version of herself. She stopped walking through the middle aisles of the grocery store, where the high-margin processed foods lived. She stopped looking at the clearance racks at big-box stores, realizing that a $10 shirt she didn't need was nearly an entire day of her life. By the 6-month mark, the vault had swelled to $7,200. This was the moment the psychological transformation became permanent. One afternoon, her manager at the hotel called a mandatory meeting to hand out financial wellness brochures, full of generic advice about diversifying 401ks. Barbara looked at the paper, then at her manager, a man who drove a leased German SUV and complained about his mounting debt, and she felt a strange, quiet sense of superiority. She didn't need a brochure. She had a system that was actually working. But as her bank account grew, so did the social resistance. In the employee break room, the atmosphere shifted. When Barbara started bringing her own coffee in a thermos and eating simple tuna sandwiches every day, her coworkers initially felt sorry for her. They whispered that she must be going through a hard time after her husband's passing. But when she politely declined to join the weekly lotto pool or the group orders for takeout, the pity turned into a subtle, biting skepticism. "You can't take it with you, Barb," one of the younger housekeepers said, waving a $20 artisan salad. "Life is for living." Barbara just smiled and thought about her blue notebook. She wasn't depriving herself. She was buying her future. The $12 limit wasn't a cage, it was the key to the exit. She was becoming a financial ghost in a world designed to track and extract every cent from the working class. By the 12-month mark, the vault held $18,400. Because she had become so efficient at living on $12 a day, her reward fund on her prepaid card often had a surplus. She used that surplus to buy a set of high-quality, professional-grade shoes for work, realizing that a $120 investment in her physical health would prevent missed shifts due to back pain later. This was the shift from scarcity mindset to strategic investment. She wasn't just hoarding money, she was optimizing her life. She began spending her weekends not at the mall or in front of the TV, but driving to the outskirts of Orange County and into Lake County, looking at small plots of land and visiting showrooms for manufactured and prefab homes. The skepticism from her peers reached a fever pitch when Barbara announced she was looking to buy. "On a housekeeper salary in this market?" they laughed. "You'll be in debt until you're 90, Barb." They couldn't see the math because they were still looking at the monthly total, while Barbara was looking at the daily win. She knew something they didn't. She didn't need a $500,000 suburban mansion to be free. She needed a foundation that she owned. By month 15, the vault hit $26,000. The discipline had become automatic. She no longer felt the itch to spend. The $12 was no longer a struggle. It was plenty. She had learned the ultimate secret of the wealthy. Power comes from what you keep, not what you earn. She found a small, sunlit lot in a quiet community that allowed for high-quality manufactured homes. The price for the land and a modern, energy-efficient 2-bedroom prefab unit was $85,000. Most people would see that and think 30-year mortgage. Barbara saw it and thought down payment and a 5-year private note. At the 18-month mark, the final tally was in. Between her aggressive $12 method savings, a small, forgotten life insurance policy from her late husband that finally cleared, and the interest from her high-yield vault, Barbara had $38,000 in cash. She walked into the office of the prefab home builder not with a prayer, but with a position of power. She put down $35,000 in cash, a 40% down payment that eliminated the need for traditional high-interest predatory lending. The day she signed the papers, she went back to the hotel break room for the last time. She didn't make a scene. She didn't brag. She simply sat down, opened her blue notebook, and wrote, "Total spent today, $0. Total gained, a home." When she handed in her 2-week notice, her manager was stunned. "Where are you going, Barbara? Did you find a better paying job?" She looked him in the eye, the blue of her eyes serene and unshakable. "No," she said. "I just finished paying for my freedom." She had defied the status quo by proving that the American dream wasn't dead. It was just hidden behind a wall of $12 decisions. When Barbara walked out of that hotel for the last time, she didn't just leave behind a set of master keys. She left behind a contagion of hope. In the high-pressure environment of the Orlando service industry, where workers are often treated as interchangeable parts of a machine, Barbara's success was a glitch in the system that everyone noticed. It began with Elena, a Salvadoran immigrant who worked the heavy-duty laundry machines, a woman whose life was a blur of steam, detergent, and the crushing weight of payday loans. Elena had watched Barbara's transformation for 18 months. She had seen the blue notebook. She had seen the transition from a woman who looked gray with exhaustion to a woman who possessed the quiet, terrifying calm of the truly free. 1 week after Barbara left, Elena bought her own blue notebook. She didn't tell anyone. She just started her own vault and set her limit to $10 a day, adjusting for her slightly lower wage. The viral nature of the $12 method wasn't fueled by social media algorithms or flashy marketing. It was fueled by the mirror neuron effect, a neurobiological phenomenon where individuals learn and replicate behaviors by observing the success of their peers. Within 2 months, the $12 tribe had formed in the shadows of the hotel's basement. It wasn't a formal club, there were no meetings, but you could see the signs everywhere. The thermos of homebrewed coffee, the simple brown bag lunches, and the shared silence when the vending machines hummed temptingly in the break room. This was a silent revolution of the peripheral workforce. These women, who the system counted on to be financially illiterate and perpetually desperate, were suddenly becoming micro-accountants. The movement began to change the very fabric of their local community in Kissimmee. Historically, these neighborhoods were food deserts or debt traps lined with check-cashing storefronts and fast food chains designed to extract the few dollars these workers had left. But as more women adopted Barbara's discipline, the flow of capital shifted. The local check-cashing place noticed a 15% drop in volume from the hotel workers. The communal potluck replaced the individual fast food run. This is what sociologists call collective efficacy, the ability of a group to bridge their resources to achieve a common goal. They started a rideshare system, not to be friendly, but to save the $8 a day spent on individual gas and wear and tear. By pooling their $12 daily limits, they were effectively hacking the cost of living. One specific case was Sarah, a 24-year-old front desk clerk who was drowning in lifestyle creep fueled by the need to look the part of a luxury hotel employee. She was spending $60 a week on manicures and hundreds on credit card-funded wardrobes. She saw Elena and the other housekeepers and, for the first time, felt a pang of intellectual jealousy. She realized that the housekeepers had more net worth in their vaults than she had in her entire life. Sarah joined the movement, applying the logic of the $12 method to her digital life, unsubscribing from every one-click retail trap on her phone. She documented her journey on a private group chat, which eventually leaked to other service workers in the nearby theme parks. The method was no longer just about Barbara. It was a manual for class mobility. However, the system did not take this quietly. By the fourth month of this silent strike against consumption, hotel management began to notice a change in the labor force. Desperate workers are compliant workers. When a housekeeper isn't worried about her rent being paid on Friday, she is less likely to accept an unpaid overtime shift on Saturday. The debt labor trap was failing. Management even attempted to ban personal notebooks on the floor, citing safety concerns, but the women just memorized their numbers. They had discovered the IKEA effect in their finances. They valued their savings more because they had built them through the labor of self-denial. The impact was most visible at the local credit union. The manager there reported a surge in high-yield savings applications from a demographic that usually only held basic checking accounts. These women weren't just saving, they were becoming a liquidity block. They were moving their money out of the big corporate banks that charged them low balance fees and into institutions that actually served them. This was the collective transformation, the realization that the invisible workers held the actual power. If they stopped spending on the leakage, the giants of the service economy would starve. Barbara's simple daily game had evolved into a sophisticated blockade against systemic exploitation. The $12 method had become a rite of passage for every woman in the colony who was tired of being a passenger in her own life. They weren't just saving for houses, they were saving for the power to say no. Barbara no longer wakes up to the shrill, demanding ring of an alarm clock at 4 in the morning. She wakes up to the natural light filtering through the hibiscus outside her bedroom window. But her legacy isn't found in the physical walls of her prefab home. It is found in the dangerous philosophy she left behind. You see, the $12 method was never really about the $12. It was about the reclamation of the human will. In the high-stakes world of modern finance, simplicity is a revolutionary act. The entire American economic machine is predicated on complexity, on the idea that you need a degree in macroeconomics, a complex portfolio of diversified assets, and a constant eye on the Federal Reserve to survive. Barbara proved that for the working class, this complexity is a smokescreen. It is designed to make you feel small, confused, and ultimately dependent on the very institutions that profit from your debt. From a neuroscientific perspective, Barbara was essentially performing a daily bypass of her limbic system, the primitive part of the brain that seeks immediate gratification and reacts to the perceived scarcity of a low bank balance. By imposing a rigid, almost ritualistic limit of $12, she strengthened her prefrontal cortex, the seat of executive function and long-term planning. She turned her financial life from a series of impulsive reactions into a calculated, strategic operation. This is the inconvenient truth that the credit card companies and the big box retailers find so threatening. Poverty in a developed nation is often less about the total amount of money coming in and more about the capture of that money before it can be used for leverage. The system doesn't just want your labor, it wants your focus. By narrowing her focus to a single manageable daily win, Barbara made herself unhackable. She began to view the American dream not as a destination reached through a 30-year debt contract, but as a state of being where no one else owns your time. This is where her philosophy challenges the very narrative of social mobility. We're told that to get ahead, we must work more, earn more, and consume more. Barbara's life is a testament to a different reality. To get ahead, you must need less. Her $12 limit was a psychological firewall. It blocked the constant signals of the consumer culture that tell us we are incomplete without the next purchase. When you realize that you can survive and even thrive on a micro-budget, you lose your fear. And a worker who has lost their fear of not having enough is a worker the system can no longer control. This is the dangerous truth Barbara discovered. The economy needs you to be broke but busy. It needs you to be exhausted so that you make poor, impulsive spending decisions. It needs you to be in a constant state of low-level panic about your rent so that you never look up long enough to see the exit door. Barbara's method was the exit door. She proved that wealth isn't a number, it's a ratio. It's the ratio of what you own versus what owns you. In her case, the ratio shifted entirely in her favor. She became a sovereign individual on a housekeeper's wage, a concept usually reserved for tech billionaires and elite investors. Her story serves as a critique of the poverty industry, the collection of payday lenders, high-interest car dealerships, and corporate landlords that thrive on the leakage Barbara managed to plug. If every service worker in the United States adopted a $12 micro-limit for just 1 year, the shift in capital would be enough to collapse the predatory debt markets. Barbara didn't just save for a house, she staged a one-woman coup against the status quo. She proved that the underdog doesn't need to change the system to win. The underdog just needs to stop feeding the system. Her legacy is a quiet, persistent whisper in the ears of the invisible workforce. You are not your debt, you are not your rent, and you are only one $12 decision away from starting your own revolution. Barbara's journey proves that financial survival in the United States is no longer a matter of working harder, but of thinking smarter. The $12 method is more than a budget. It is a neurological hack that replaces the chaos of monthly anxiety with the precision of daily control.